Hello there, guys. This is AlienButlerBlunders, and I'm here today for a bit of a different review. I'm going to be looking at my fantasy novels that I've collected and read, and I've just got some comments on them and the editions. I was inspired to do this because recently I picked up one of the rarer hardback editions of the Silmarillion, as well as Unfinished Tales, and these are quite difficult to get a hold of. So I thought that that while I'm commenting on these and just showing off the details, I would show off some of my other models. In the background, I've got my Legolas figure from Lord of the Rings, as well as my Bilbo figure. So I think they're going to have to go because they want to fall over. But anyway, I'll probably do a review on these later. But I will move on to the books. I'll probably get the other ones out of the way first and then talk about these two beauties at the end. But here is my copy of Lord of the Rings. It's I got these all second hand, and they're quite scarce books. But if you keep an eye out, you can find some really great books second hand. But admittedly, it does take quite a bit of searching. So this is the version of Lord of the Rings that came out with the same time as the movies, and so in the early 2000s, and it's a single edition novel of all of the three books: the Fellowship of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring, the Two Towers, and Return of the King. I like the single edition version of this quite a lot. Of every book in the collection, I have to say, Lord of the Rings is in itself like the full buffet, like everything. And of every books I've got here, I'd have to say, even compared to the Silmarillion, which I've read, I'd have to say Lord of the Rings is the best. It's just the most complex, layered fantasy novel I can say I've read. So there's that one done. And here I've got a version of The Hobbit with one of J.R.R. Tolkien's original doodles almost on the front of it. And I'm not as keen on The Hobbit as I am on Lord of the Rings. It's a lot shorter novel, and I believe Tolkien wrote it for a younger audience, so it is still enjoyable, but it just doesn't have the maturity of Lord of the Rings. So I had to get it anyway as a Tolkien fan, but there we are, and it's one of the scarcer editions anyway, with Tolkien's own drawings on the front. I'm not always a big fan of the merchandised new versions of the Hobbit novels that you see with them. I think there's an open door on the front. I prefer, if I can, to find more retro editions, and this is one of them. There's a little note on the back that it was one of the author's doodles, and so so it's not much different to any other version of The Hobbit you'd find. It's in case you saw a signature there, it was one of the printed versions. This isn't a signed copy, I must say, but it's got the maps in the back, which are to be expected with The Hobbit. Anyway, so moving on. Here I have got my Narnia novels. So I read these the most recently, and I have to say that I was like pleasantly surprised with how good the stories were. They feel like they're written for a younger readership than Lord of the Rings, so perhaps The Hobbit. But it's an interesting narratives about there's lots of Christian myth in it, basically, and lots of Christian parables and stories. And on the front, you see you've got the White Witch, who's understood to represent the devil, and there's Aslan on the side, who's supposed to represent Jesus Christ. And so, if you can, I know the strong Christian analogies probably put off some readers from the novels, but I'm comfortable with it, and I thought it was thoroughly enjoyable. This is all seven of the novels, because they made 7 Narnia books, and the first one, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, is the most famous, but they're all very enjoyable, well-written books. And whatever people say about C.S. Lewis, he does know how to write a story. Just don't expect. Just read it as a children's book, to be honest, and just don't expect too much out of it. And you can see on the contents there, of all the stories, the only ones that you have to really read is the very first one, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. That's the one everybody knows about, and it's probably the best one in all of them, but all of them are very good for a different reason. The Magician's Nephew was a prologue written after the first novel, so chronologically it's the earliest, even though it was written after, so it's set in terms of plot earlier. And The Horse and His Boy is it reminded me a lot of Aladdin. It was about set in a kind of fictional Middle East, and there was a boy and a talking horse who saves him. And great story, that one. Prince Caspian is about the original 4 children from The Lion and the Witch and the Wardrobe, but just extending their journeys a bit more. Voyage of the Dawn Treader was about a voyage across to the edge of the world, on a boat. So it's got the 4 characters on a boat in the sea, and there's mermaids and things. The Silver Chair is probably the least talked about book in here, and it's probably one of the best, I think. It's got 2 of the later children. There's originally 4 children, there's 2 later children, and they're sort of the successors of the first 4 children, and they go to this future Narnia where there's a new character like the White Witch, called the Lady of the Green Kirtle, I think it is, and she's just like the White Witch except green, and she's like a reincarnation of her. And there's a dramatic scene when she turns into a snake, and most of the story's about being in the underworld, trying to save a prince who's been captured. So and there's lots of elves and things who live underground in it, so it's quite a good story. And the last battle's about just the last battle. There's a big final battle in the end of the world, as Aslan appears, and so the characters kind of go to heaven. So anyway, so it's worth reading. It's good children's literature. So there's Narnia. And this is Watership Down. Like, I don't know if many people know about this novel, but it was written in the 50s, so about the same time as Lord of the Rings and Narnia. And I've included it in fantasy because it's basically just about the story of talking rabbits. There's no magic. The rabbits don't talk to people. It's just about a small group of rabbits trying to survive in a brutal natural world. And so similar to fantasy in that your characters are talking animals, basically, even though they only talk to other animals. So it's quite a mature children's book, basically. And it's about 2 rabbits, Pfeiffer and Hazel, 2 brothers who escape their warren, and it's they just try to find a new home. And there's lots of World War II vibes in this. I think the author wrote it just to talk about the natural lives of rabbits, and thought the little internal wars of rabbits' lives were quite interesting. But it does have strong like World War II analogies, and like Woundwort, who's the big rabbit at the end, the big antagonist, does seem a bit like Stalin or Hitler with like a dictatorship society. So yeah, it's a good read and an enjoyable read. Yeah, so that's just a hardback edition of it. There's one or two maps, but they're not essential. It's just nice to have it there anyway. Okay, so anyway, onto the big boys now. I read the Silmarillion after reading Lord of the Rings, and took a lot of dedication and a lot of hard work, and it's just brilliant, hands down brilliant. It's like the English mythology we never had. Basically, you've got countries like Ireland with their fairies, and Norway with their trolls and things, and that have quite a complex sort of Gaelic-based Celtic history. I felt like England never really had that, so Tolkien's kind of provided his own mythology universe and fantasy with quite strong Christian vibes, but not so in your face as C.S. Lewis. So it's quite hard to put into words, but it's about, long story short, elves who live. When the elves were created by God, they lived in this island called Valinor, which with the gods. There are a couple of gods who are like just strong embodiments of nature. There's quite a few different ones, and an elf called Fëanor, who's the greatest of the elves, produces 3 magic gems called Silmaril, which have stored in them the last light of these 2 magic trees, which were like the original light source, which were destroyed. And it's they leave to Earth, to Middle Earth and the mainland, and there's just a long series of wars and events and struggles and things against Melkor, or Morgoth, who is kind of Sauron's the guy before Sauron, basically. And it's just a very, very long tale in medievalist style, and it is very dense text with loads of names. You don't need to remember them all, but if you liked Lord of the Rings and wanted more, there's nothing more you could ask for. My only problem with the Silmarillion is, this is just my personal opinion, don't mean to offend anyone, but I didn't feel like I was with the characters in the same sense I was with Lord of the Rings. The speech didn't feel as natural. The scenes didn't feel as convincing, like they were happening in the moment. Like being a legendary myth, I know that's the point, and it's supposed to be like the elves of Lord of the Rings legendary history, and I appreciate that with mythology you lose a lot of that directness, but that's just the style. There is inserted quotes, but a lot of it is reported speech, the reported actions of characters. So anyway, so it is a good book, but I saw this edition one day and I just had to have it, because again it's got Tolkien's paintings on the front of it, so there's more on the back, and probably one of the nicest features about the book is, it's quite hard to do this one-handed, but there's a big map. So there we are. It is a huge map of all the lands of Beleriand, which was like the old Middle Earth, and it's a completely different geography to Middle Earth if you're familiar with it. So it's more funny names you've got to learn. But anyway, it was a lovely feature. So yeah, very lucky to have found these. And Unfinished Tales is very nice as well. So yeah, it's got on the helm. It's got very weird painting on the front, but it's supposed to be a helmet. So if somebody was looking this way, it's a funny curled helmet, but it does look a bit like a dragon. And no pictures on the back, but again, it's got a similar map in there, but this time of Middle Earth, as in Lord of the Rings Middle Earth, not Elder Days, Silmarillion Middle Earth. But anyway, this really is a book of unfinished tales. So there's the children of Húrin in here, Narnia and Húrin. There's talk descriptions of the land of Valinor, which was another island, which is where Aragorn's ancestors were from. This great empire, and there's bits about Galadriel and Celeborn and stuff, but it is quite an irregular, unstructured narrative. But yeah, it's just it was enjoyable for me to read, and I'd be happy to read it again. But so yeah, these two books are really just for dedicated Tolkien fans. Like if it's just what's in Lord of the Rings, but with a bit more growth. Like on a bare level, all you need to read is Lord of the Rings. That's just my opinion. But The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, but for like advanced Tolkien fans, these are definitely worth it. But anyway, a comment about unfinished tales. This I remember reading an advert for this on Amazon saying that that it talks about the five wizards and the blue wizards and these mysterious spiritual figures. So there are Valar, who are the gods, and there are the Maya, who are like angel figures, and that's what Gandalf is basically. And they're kind of like elves, but just more powerful. And so I was expecting a longer narrative about the blue wizards, but there wasn't really much about it. It was distant, like it just didn't develop them as much. So don't expect too much about wizards in this. Just expect stuff about Numenor, and no, there's a version of the children of Húrin in this, which is again just an extended version of the children of Húrin in this, which is just a chapter of the Silmarillion. So yeah, so thank you for watching my video today. Please like, comment, subscribe below, and any suggestions or any recommendations would be appreciated. So thank you again. See you in the next video.